Imagine for a moment that you're an ancient alchemist, hunched over your laboratory table. Before you sits a lump of dark, dense lead. Your life's work? To transform this heavy metal into radiant gold. Not through tricks or deception, but through understanding the fundamental nature of matter itself. This alchemical quest serves as the perfect metaphor for something far more extraordinary, the transformation of consciousness itself. What if the darkness and light within our experience aren't eternal enemies, but different expressions of the same fundamental reality? What if the purpose of human existence includes the transmutation of darkness to light through conscious awareness? The Emerald Tablets put it this way: darkness and light are both of one nature, different only in seeming, for each arose from the source of all. Darkness is disorder, light is order. Darkness transmuted is light of the light. Wait a minute, is this ancient text suggesting that darkness and light emerge from the same source? That they share the same essence? That what appears most opposed in our experience might be united at a deeper level? I hear your skepticism. After all, we experience light and darkness as fundamental opposites. The contrast seems built into the structure of reality itself. Yet, across traditions spanning continents and epochs, mystics, sages, and now even quantum physicists point towards something quite unexpected, a more fundamental unity underlying these apparent opposites. Thoth, Tehuti, represented by the ibis bird, embodies this transformative principle. The ibis with its long beak digs into the mud and darkness, extracting what's hidden and bringing it into the light. This symbolism perfectly captures our human capacity to engage consciously with the shadow aspects of existence and, through awareness, transform them. But hold on, am I suggesting we should all become like the ibis, digging around in the darkness? Wouldn't it be safer, more pleasant, to focus solely on the light? Many spiritual approaches seem to suggest exactly that, emphasizing positive thinking, light, and love while avoiding or rejecting darkness. Yet the alchemical wisdom suggests something quite different. In the words of Carl Jung, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This perspective challenges our conventional thinking. We typically view darkness as something to be eliminated, overcome, or escaped. Yet here, darkness is described as only a veil, not an opposing force, but a covering that conceals our inherent luminosity. The Taoist symbol of yin and yang offers perhaps the most elegant expression of this non-dual understanding. The familiar black and white symbol with each color containing a dot of the other. This representation shows that opposites are not truly separate but interconnected and interdependent. When the Tao Te Ching states, "The Tao gave birth to the One gave birth to the two gave birth to the three, and the three gave birth to the 10,000 things," it charts the emergence of apparent multiplicity from original unity. The two refers to yin and yang, which are not fundamentally separate but emanations of the one. This progression illuminates how what appears as duality emerges from a deeper, non-dual source. But this sounds awfully abstract, you might be thinking. What does it mean in my daily life? When I feel anger, fear, or grief, should I not try to replace these dark emotions with lighter ones? Here's where things get practical. The approach suggested by non-dual wisdom traditions isn't about replacing or rejecting dark emotions, but transforming them through conscious awareness. Rather than waging war against our darkness, we engage in an alchemical process that transmutes its energy. Consider the Tibetan Buddhist practice of Tonglen. In this meditation, you breathe in darkness, suffering, and negativity. transform it within yourself through awareness. Breathe out light, healing, and compassion. One practitioner describes, through Tonglen, we are essentially transmuting spiritual energy. We take in the dark, dense energy of suffering and ignorance, transform it with our awareness and compassion, and breathe out light and healing energy. This practice embodies the alchemical teaching about transmutation of darkness into light through conscious engagement. But does it work? And if so, how? Modern psychology and neuroscience give us some clues. When we resist or suppress difficult emotions, they often intensify and persist. By contrast, when we bring full awareness to them, without judgment or rejection, something remarkable happens. The energy begins to shift and transform naturally. We've all experienced this phenomenon. A moment of anger arises, and when we fully feel it without acting it out or suppressing it, the energy shifts on its own. The Sufis describe this as polishing the mirror of the heart, allowing the emotions to move through us without obstruction, revealing the clear awareness beneath. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, from which Thoth, Tahuti emerged, light and darkness were personified by Ra, the sun god, and Apep, the serpent of chaos, yet both were understood as necessary aspects of the cosmic order, Ma'at. The daily journey of Ra's solar bark through the underworld at night symbolized the necessary interplay between light and darkness. Ra had to pass through darkness to be reborn each morning, demonstrating that darkness was not evil but a necessary phase in the eternal cycle. The question becomes, how do we move beyond conceptual understanding to direct realization of this transformative potential? How do we become spiritual alchemists in our daily lives? If you find value in these alchemical approaches to transforming darkness into light, consider subscribing to receive more content on practical wisdom for conscious evolution. Non-dual meditation offers a pathway to this direct realization. Contemporary meditation teacher Toby Ouvry describes 3 stages. First, emptying the mind and resting in pure, formless awareness, learning to experience consciousness without objects. Second, developing simultaneous awareness of both pure consciousness and form, cultivating dual awareness. Finally, merging form and formless into a unitive experience, achieving non-dual awareness where emptiness appears as form, and form appears as emptiness. These stages gradually dissolve the illusory boundary between darkness and light, subject and object, self and other. But I can hear your skepticism again. This sounds suspiciously like spiritual bypassing, using meditation to escape from dealing with real-world problems or psychological issues. A fair concern, non-dual practices can indeed be misused to avoid facing darkness rather than transforming it. True alchemy requires us to engage directly with our shadows, not bypass them. In Kashmiri Shaivism, one of the most sophisticated articulations of non-duality, we find a coherent framework for understanding how apparent duality emerges from absolute unity. This tradition describes how Shiva, pure consciousness, and Shakti, energy power, appear as distinct but remain aspects of the same ultimate reality. The manifest universe emerges as Shakti appears to differentiate from Shiva, creating the illusion of separation. As articulated in Trika philosophy texts, the Lord remains the same, and no universe separated from him has ever arisen. It is the false notion inoculated by limitations which creates this apparent separation. This philosophical tradition explains that what we perceive as darkness, tamas, is not opposed to light but a contracted form of divine power, Kriya Shakti. The appearance of separation is precisely that, an appearance, not an ontological reality. The violet flame meditation offers another approach to energetic transmutation. Sit comfortably and center your awareness in your heart. Visualize a small violet flame in the center of your heart. Allow this flame to grow, gradually filling your entire body. As it expands, imagine it transmuting any dense or contracted energy into light. Extend this violet flame beyond your body to encompass your environment. Recognize that this transmuting flame represents your own consciousness in its transformative aspect. You might wonder whether these practices have any basis beyond ancient tradition. Surprisingly, modern science, particularly quantum physics, has begun to confirm what these traditions have long proclaimed, that at the most fundamental level, reality transcends the apparent opposites of light and darkness, subject and object, observer and observed. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates that light behaves differently depending on whether it is being observed. When not observed, light behaves as a wave, showing an interference pattern. When observed, it behaves as particles. This suggests that consciousness and physical reality are not separate domains, but interconnected aspects of a unified field, a scientific confirmation of non-dual principles. As physicist John Wheeler proposed with his participatory universe concept, observers are not passive witnesses but active participants in creating reality. This aligns with the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, suggesting that inner and outer realities are reflections of the same unified field. But now I must push back against my own argument. While these quantum effects are fascinating, can we really extrapolate from quantum behavior to human consciousness and spiritual transformation? Many physicists would caution against such leaps. Perhaps the parallels between quantum physics and non-dual wisdom are metaphorical rather than literal. Yet, the metaphor itself remains powerful. Both quantum physics and non-dual traditions point toward a reality that transcends our ordinary conceptual frameworks, a reality in which apparent opposites are revealed as complementary aspects of a deeper unity. That's all very nice, you might be thinking, but what about real suffering? What about injustice, violence, and oppression in the world? Surely we can't meditate our way out of these problems. Another excellent point. The alchemical perspective doesn't minimize suffering or suggest that painful experiences aren't real. Rather, it offers a more empowered approach for engaging with difficulties when they arise. This transformative process operates at multiple levels: individual, collective, and cosmic. At the individual level, we engage with our personal shadows, bringing awareness to contracted emotions, limiting beliefs and unconscious patterns. Through this engagement, transmutation occurs naturally. At the collective level, we confront societal shadows, patterns of injustice, exploitation, and harm that operate at cultural scales. By bringing collective awareness to these patterns, we participate in their transformation rather than perpetuating them through ignorance or avoidance. At the cosmic level, we recognize our participation in the great dance of evolution, the ongoing process through which consciousness explores its own nature through increasingly complex forms. As evolutionary biologist Elizabeth Sahtouris observes, crisis precedes transformation. Problems are evolutionary drivers. This perspective reframes challenges as opportunities for evolution rather than obstacles to be overcome. If you've experimented with any practices for transmuting darkness to light, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments section below. What unifies these levels is the alchemical principle of transmutation through conscious engagement. Whether working with personal shadows, collective patterns, or cosmic processes, the pathway involves bringing awareness to what appears as darkness, recognizing its essential nature and allowing transformation to occur through this recognition. Still, I must acknowledge a tension in this approach. By emphasizing the ultimate unity of darkness and light, do we risk minimizing the very real experiences of suffering? By speaking of transmutation, do we create unrealistic expectations of instant transformation? These concerns merit serious consideration. The non-dual perspective doesn't erase distinctions or deny the reality of suffering. Rather, it places these experiences within a broader context that offers greater possibilities for transformation. The practice of shadow integration combines psychological insight with spiritual transformation. Identify a dark aspect of yourself, fear, anger, jealousy, etc. Rather than rejecting it, bring full awareness to it. Recognize it as contracted energy rather than inherently negative. Through acceptance and awareness, allow it to transform naturally. Experience how the energy shifts from contracted to expanded. What makes these practices different from conventional approaches is how they work with darkness rather than against it. They recognize that what appears as darkness contains the potential for transformation when engaged with awareness. From a cosmological perspective, darkness and light have always been intertwined. The universe began in what appears as darkness, and light emerged from this primordial state. Modern cosmology shows that what we call darkness, dark matter and dark energy, comprises approximately 95% of the universe, while visible light represents only a small fraction of existence. Yet both are essential aspects of the same cosmos. As astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson notes, we are all connected to each other biologically, to the Earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. This interconnection includes both the light and dark aspects of cosmic evolution. Rest in the recognition that awareness itself transcends the distinction between darkness and light. Darkness is only a veil, and that sealed in thine heart is brightness eternal. But let me challenge my own perspective here by suggesting that transmutation happens naturally through awareness. Am I making it sound too easy? The reality is that engaging with our darkness can be intensely challenging. Some shadows are deeply embedded in our psyche, reinforced by trauma, social conditioning, and habitual patterns. Transformation often requires sustained practice, courage, and sometimes support from therapists, teachers, or community. The alchemists knew this well. They spoke of the prima material, the primary material that must undergo numerous operations before yielding the philosopher's stone. The initial substance was often described as dark, chaotic, and repulsive. The alchemical process wasn't quick or easy, but required repeated cycles of dissolution and reconstitution. This speaks to the nature of psychological and spiritual transformation. It rarely happens in a single blinding moment of insight. More often, it unfolds through repeated cycles of awareness, integration, and renewal. In Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam, we find Rumi declaring, "The lamps are different, but the light is the same. It comes from beyond." For Sufis, darkness is not opposed to light, but the necessary ground for light's manifestation. The dark night of the soul is not separate from divine light, but the pathway to it. The Sufi practice of dhikr, remembrance through repeated sacred phrases, helps dissolve the veils of separation to reveal the unity underlying apparent diversity. The modern philosopher Ken Wilber describes this dynamic. Shadow is not simply negative energy, it is positive energy that has been rendered unconscious. When we bring awareness to these contracted aspects of ourselves, we reclaim the energy bound within them. This understanding transforms our approach to challenges. Rather than seeing difficulties as obstacles to be overcome or enemies to be defeated, we can recognize them as contracted energy awaiting transformation. This shift in perspective changes everything from how we approach personal healing to how we engage with societal and environmental challenges. Modern scientific discoveries provide fascinating parallels to these ancient understandings. The law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. This scientific principle aligns perfectly with the alchemical understanding that darkness and light represent different forms of the same fundamental energy. Physicist David Bohm proposed that the universe consists of an implicate order, the unmanifest potential, and an explicate order, the manifest world. This model aligns with non-dual understandings of a unified ground of being from which apparent dualities emerge. Quantum entanglement, where particles remain instantly connected regardless of distance, demonstrates that separation is ultimately an illusion. As Bohm stated, the notion that all these fragments are separately existent is evidently an illusion, and this illusion cannot do other than lead to endless conflict and confusion. Of course, skepticism remains healthy. We should question both ancient wisdom and modern science, testing their claims against our direct experience. The invitation here isn't to accept these ideas on authority, but to explore them through practice and direct investigation. The merging of light and darkness ultimately represents a recognition of our true nature, that beyond all apparent duality lies a unified field of consciousness, the source from which both darkness and light emerge and to which they eternally return. This recognition doesn't erase the practical distinctions we make in daily life, but places them within a broader context of fundamental unity. We can navigate the complexity of human experience with greater wisdom and compassion when we understand the non-dual nature of reality. In Jewish mysticism, particularly Kabbalah, there is a sophisticated understanding of how apparent opposites emerge from the Ein Sof, the infinite. The Kabbalistic tree of life illustrates how divine light emanates through various sephirot, divine attributes, creating apparent dualities that remain connected to the unified source. Kabbalistic teachings emphasize that the divine light is never absent, even in apparent darkness. For that which is light is not dark, and that which is darkness is not light. Yet paradoxically, both emerge from the same source beyond dualistic conception. As scholar J. Michelson notes, this view is called non-duality, not two, and it is found at the summit of nearly every mystical tradition in the world. Non-duality does not mean that the world is an illusion. It means that the foundational truth of the universe is not division but unity. The ancient declaration remains as relevant today as when it was first uttered. Know that darkness is only a veil. Sealed in thine heart is brightness eternal, waiting the moment of freedom to conquer, waiting to rend the veil of the night. This brightness doesn't need to be created or achieved. It exists already as our fundamental nature, veiled only by the appearance of separation. Through practices that cultivate non-dual awareness, shadow integration, and conscious engagement with all aspects of experience, we participate in the alchemical process of transmutation. We become conscious participants in evolution, transmuting darkness to light through recognition of our fundamental nature. We become like the ibis bird, digging into the mud of existence to bring hidden treasures into the light. The journey of transmutation invites us to embrace all aspects of our experience, the light and the dark, the joyful and the painful, the expansive and the contracted, recognizing them as aspects of the same consciousness that we are. In this recognition, we discover the true meaning of alchemy, the transformation of lead into gold, darkness into light, separation into unity. But this recognition is not an end point. It is the beginning of a new way of being in the world. The transmutation of darkness to light unfolds as an ongoing process, moment by moment, day by day. We continue to encounter darkness in its many forms: personal challenges, collective crises, periods of doubt and confusion. The difference lies in how we engage with these experiences. When we recognize darkness as contracted light rather than its opposite, we approach it with curiosity rather than fear, with compassion rather than judgment, with awareness rather than avoidance. This shift in orientation changes everything. As we cultivate this alchemical consciousness in ourselves, we naturally contribute to the transmutation of darkness in our relationships, communities, and the broader world. Not through imposing our will or fighting against what we perceive as wrong, but through bringing the light of awareness to all that we encounter. This doesn't mean passive acceptance of harmful conditions, but active engagement from a place of non-dual understanding. When we recognize the unity underlying apparent separation, our actions naturally align with the well-being of the whole, rather than the limited interests of the separate self. The ancient Hermetic wisdom declared, "As above, so below, as within, so without." Our inner work of transmuting darkness to light ripples outward, contributing to the larger alchemical process unfolding in human consciousness and in the cosmos itself. This is the great work to which we are called, not as a burden or obligation, but as the natural expression of our deepest nature. Through conscious participation in this alchemical dance, we fulfill the purpose expressed in the Emerald Tablets. This, my children, your purpose in being, transmutation of darkness to light,